This is the largest battle in human history, involving a coalition of over 70 countries. Every soldier is equipped with the most advanced mechanical battlesuits, but their enemies are even more formidable, an alien species invading Earth. It all started 5 years ago when a meteor suddenly crashed in Europe. At first, people thought it was just an ordinary astronomical disaster, but it turned out that the meteor carried an alien species called mimics. These creatures had extraordinary intelligence and speed, and they quickly swept across the European continent. After sacrificing millions of soldiers, humanity realized that Earth's technology was powerless to resist the invaders. It wasn't until after 5 years of brutal warfare that humans finally developed powerful mechanical battlesuits, allowing soldiers to exhibit immense combat power after just basic training. In the Battle of Verdun, humanity finally repelled the enemy for the first time, with one standout soldier, Rita, killing hundreds of mimics in a single day, earning her the title Angel of Verdun. The mechanical battlesuits restored humanity's confidence. Following this victory, the Allied forces decided to press the advantage and aim to annihilate all enemies in the upcoming decisive battle. The protagonist, Cage, is a military media officer. To show the public the reality of the battlefield, the general decides to send Cage to the front lines to film. Cage is stunned upon hearing this because he has never been on the battlefield before, and being cowardly and afraid of death, he tries to refuse. However, the general doesn't care and orders soldiers to tase Cage. When Cage regains consciousness, he finds himself at a frontline camp surrounded by new recruits. A sergeant approaches, and Cage quickly explains that he ended up there by accident, begging the sergeant to let him call his superiors. Though the sergeant appears to agree, he instead takes Cage to the new recruit's registration area. As Cage looks on in shock, the sergeant pulls out a note from his pocket with detailed information about Cage. The note says that Cage is a deserter who likes to impersonate officers to avoid combat, and that he would try to make a phone call, something the general had clearly anticipated. The sergeant then assigns Cage to a squad preparing for the battle against the mimics the next day. The squad is engaged in last-minute madness, and when the sergeant sees soldiers hiding cards, he punishes them by making them swallow the cards. After a brief introduction to the squad, the sergeant leaves. The next day arrives quickly. It's the day humanity launches its all-out attack. Watching his comrades expertly operate their suits, Cage is utterly confused because this is his first time wearing a suit, and he can barely walk smoothly. But there's no time to get familiar with it as the troops start moving towards the battlefield. As they prepare to airdrop, the plane suddenly comes under attack, and a massive explosion forces everyone to make an emergency landing. Cage is the last to jump, and the safety rope from his suit causes him to swing uncontrollably in the air. Luckily, as the plane explodes, the rope snaps and Cage lands safely. But just as he gets up, he sees his comrade Big Buddy killed instantly. Cage has no choice but to follow the main force. As he gets closer to the front lines, the number of corpses increases, and mimics keep emerging from the ground, turning the entire battlefield into a slaughterhouse. Even the Valkyrie can't withstand the endless onslaught of aliens and dies in front of Cage. Seeing this, Cage tries to flee, but his comrade stops him. The entire battlefield has collapsed, and with monsters pouring in from the front, it's clear the mimics had anticipated humanity's plan. Suddenly, the ground behind the squad begins to shift. Mimics have launched a surprise attack from below. In close combat, humans are no match for the mimics, whose tentacle attacks massacre the soldiers like ants. As Cage watches all his comrades die, he finally finds the switch for his suit and starts firing wildly at the monsters. Severely wounded, the mimic is eventually killed by Cage. Just as he starts laughing in relief, an unusually large mimic suddenly attacks. Cage instinctively reaches for his weapon, but the system alerts him that he's out of ammo. With the monster closing in, Cage doesn't hesitate to detonate a bomb, spraying the creature's blood all over himself, yet he doesn't die. After Cage wakes up, he finds himself back on the day before the decisive battle. He is in disbelief, and seeing the sergeant approaching, accurately calls out his name. The sergeant is slightly surprised, but doesn't think much of it. Next, the sergeant once again takes out the same note and assigns Cage to the same squad as before. The sergeant catches the soldiers gambling again and punishes them by making them swallow the cards, just as Cage remembers. As they head to the battlefield, the plane is ambushed again. After successfully landing, Cage once more witnesses Big Buddy's death. This time, he uses his experience from the previous day to save the Valkyrie. But she takes his suit's battery in return, leaving him defenseless. Cage ends up being killed by a monster emerging from the ground. When he wakes up again and sees the Valkyrie's portrait passing by, he finally realizes that he can reset time indefinitely. Cage decides to try changing everything, but the sergeant doesn't believe his wild story. So, after being brought back to the squad, Cage preemptively identifies all the squad members and even describes the cards hidden on the bed, reciting their contents from memory. The sergeant is astonished, but Cage still can't change what happens next. This time, his mouth is taped shut as he is taken to the battlefield. Cage is the first to jump out of the aircraft, and after landing successfully, he saves Big Buddy, but dies in the process. No worries. Time resets again. This time, after saving Big Buddy, Cage rushes to the battlefield but is accidentally hit by a car, resetting time once more. After countless battles, Cage becomes incredibly brave, knowing exactly what will happen next on the battlefield. However, no matter how hard he tries, he can't change the outcome of the war, and each time, he dies on the battlefield. Until one time, after saving the Valkyrie, he inadvertently mentions his ability. To his surprise, Rita is not shocked. Instead, she tells him to find her after his next reset. When Cage wakes up again, he realizes that Rita must know something. After being taken back to the squad, this time, Cage helps his comrades hide the cards in advance. During the physical training that follows, he seizes the opportunity to escape and look for Rita. When a car passes by, Cage dives underneath, but he is killed by the wheels. After several attempts, Cage finally manages to escape. However, when he finds Rita, she doesn't remember him at all.
You did. Tomorrow, at the beach. Tomorrow, at the beach. We meet. You said to find you when I wake up. You do know what's happening to me.
Come with me. Now.
Rita warns Cage not to let anyone else know about his situation, or he'll either be locked up in a mental institution or dissected as a lab subject. She accurately describes how Cage was killed and even understands his ability. After persistent questioning, Rita reveals that she once had the same ability, but lost it after being wounded and receiving a blood transfusion. She then takes Cage to a basement laboratory belonging to Dr. Carter, an expert in particle physics and microbiology whose research had been deemed insane, leading him to this downfall. Dr. Carter discovered that all mimics share a common leader, which he named Omega. The creature that killed Cage is called Alpha, a rare mutated mimic that appears only once in every 6 million creatures. All mimics are controlled by the Omega, which has the ability to manipulate time. If any Alpha is killed, Omega automatically resets the day and knows what will happen next. This is how Omega anticipated humanity's plans even before the Allied forces acted, making the victory at Verdun a false hope intended to lure humanity into an all-out war where they could be wiped out. However, by accidentally killing an Alpha, Cage became connected to Omega's neural network, gaining the ability to reset the day. Now, Cage is humanity's only hope for victory. Cage must now die and be reborn countless times until he finds Omega's hiding place. But first, they must survive the decisive battle the next day. They begin their pre-battle training, but as mechanical tentacles continuously attack, Cage is quickly knocked out. Rita coldly shoots him to restart the day, leading to grueling, repetitive training. After numerous deaths and rebirths,
Again.
Cage finally glimpses unknown images, Omega's hiding place. The two immediately return to the lab, where Dr. Carter analyzes Cage's vision and quickly pinpoints Omega's exact location. Now, Cage must focus on how to survive tomorrow's decisive battle. After countless deaths and rebirths, they learn from each experience, avoiding dying in the same place each time. Over time, they advance further across the battlefield. In the process, Cage finds himself falling in love with Rita, but they never make it off the battlefield. Cage begins to lose hope. In one reset, he escapes the camp and goes to a bar to relax. After leaving the bar, he finds the city in a state of emergency. He rushes outside only to see a swarm of mimics rapidly closing in on him. Omega has realized it is being hunted and uses its psychic powers to continuously search for the intruder's location, intending to kill it. After Cage revives again, Dr. Carter finally identifies Omega's exact location. It is hiding in an abandoned dam. The final battle is set for the next day. After countless attempts, Cage and Rita finally survive on the battlefield. They then drive a car towards the dam, encountering monster attacks along the way, something they've dealt with before. Cage handles them with ease. They reach a farmhouse where there is a helicopter they can use, but every time they get here, Rita ends up getting killed by the monsters. If Cage continues to pursue Omega, Rita's death becomes inevitable. After another reset, Cage decides not to seek out Rita or worry about his comrades. He chooses to go alone to kill Omega. After countless tries, Cage finally reaches Omega's hiding place, only to discover that it's a trap. Omega isn't there. Cage finds himself surrounded by alien creatures. Seeing no way out, he tries to shoot himself, but is stopped by an Alpha. They severely injure Cage, intending to let him bleed out so that he loses his ability to reset time. Fortunately, in a critical moment, Cage manages to jump off the dam and drown himself, resetting the day once more. When he revives, he informs Rita and Dr. Carter about Omega's trap and reveals that Omega now knows who the intruder is. Their only chance is to retrieve a device from the Allied headquarters, which Dr. Carter once developed to help Cage re-enter Omega's neural network and locate its true position. The device is locked in the General's safe. After many resets, Cage finally convinces the General to give them the device. But as soon as they leave the command room, they are attacked by guards. While they're escaping, Rita stabs the device into Cage's thigh. This time, he sees Omega's true location. It has been hiding beneath the Louvre in Paris all along. However, just as they discover this, the guards catch up to them. Their vehicle is forced to a stop by a combination of mechanical exoskeletons, and both Cage and Rita are knocked unconscious. When Cage wakes up again, he finds that he hasn't reset to the previous day. Seeing the blood transfusion tube in his arm, he realizes he has lost his ability to reset time. Now, they have only one last chance. Under the cover of darkness, Cage and Rita sneak back to the camp. Cage earns the trust of his squad by accurately recounting each member's personal story, and with Rita's support, they form a suicide squad for the final mission. They steal an aircraft and set off, aiming to reach the Louvre before dawn. During the mission, they must not kill the Alpha first, or Omega will reset time again. As the aircraft approaches the Louvre, they are attacked by mimics, forcing the squad to make an emergency landing. With the mimics closing in, the squad decides to stay behind to hold off the monsters, giving Cage and Rita more time. Cage and Rita manage to glide the damaged aircraft into the Louvre. After a fierce battle, they successfully reach their target location. Rita blocks the entrance with bombs, temporarily keeping the mimics at bay. However, an Alpha is still guarding Omega inside. Rita says a final farewell to Cage, knowing she must draw the Alpha away so that Cage can have a chance to kill Omega. After Rita lures the Alpha away, Cage jumps into the water and swims toward Omega. The Alpha kills Rita and then chases after Cage. In the water, Cage is powerless to resist and is impaled by the Alpha. But just before he dies, Cage pulls the pin on a grenade. The grenade falls straight into Omega's core. A massive explosion follows, obliterating Omega completely. The Alpha also loses control instantly, and all the mimics outside die as well. Amidst the ruins, Cage miraculously survives because Omega's blood has seeped into his body, resetting time once again. Cage finds himself back on the day before the incident. The news is reporting that just at dawn, a powerful energy wave was detected in Paris, and all the mimics suddenly lost their combat abilities. It is believed that humanity will soon be able to wipe them out completely. Cage returns to the military camp, where he sees the familiar sergeant and all the members of his squad. He then heads to the laboratory, where he finds a familiar figure waiting for him.